Hello. In this recording of our Justia webinar, Technical SEO for Law Firm Websites, Justia CEO Tim Stanley covers various aspects of technical SEO, including website security, crawlability by Google and other search engines, website speed, page layout, usability, and ADA compliance. He also shares strategies for addressing important issues for law firm sites, such as duplicate content, schema markup, and AMP, while offering solutions to help optimize your website conversions. Remember, if you'd like to see more Justia videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
All right. So this will be the fourth webinar in sort of this initial SEO series. We'll be doing a few other ones that'll be related to it. We'll be doing a year-end one, sort of running through what's going on with Google this year in 2022 and what we expect in 2023. We'll also do one on Google Business Profiles and then one on Google Analytics 4 and Google Search Console. So there'll be a few more that are probably a little bit shorter and a little bit more focused. But in terms of core SEO, this is sort of the final one of this series. Just in terms of the previous ones, we did one on content. That's the most important thing. So I'm going to talk about technical SEO, but content's still the most important thing for your website. I don't want us to think you just do technical stuff, everything's going to rank high. You got to have great content. And then I did a couple on links, one on the basics of linking, and then one a little bit more advanced linking, giving you both, how to check out how competitors are doing and different ideas for getting links to your website. So those are also both very worthwhile watching, and it'll also help you with your website as well. The technical SEO, to a certain extent, is a little bit. It's not going to be. I'm not going to give a talk, technically like I'm talking to engineers. It's not like an engineering presentation, but it's probably something that you want to take back to your developer to make sure that they're on top of it. So there might be some nomenclature that's a little bit hard to understand, but I'll try to sort of step back and explain it. And I'll also will point out the things that are really important. So some of this is basics. Some of this really, really matters. And I'll sort of just really, I'll note that so that you guys can make that, sort of highlight that part and make sure that you're on top of the things that really count. Some of the stuff, is sort of bread and butter stuff that almost everyone does. So with that, we're going to run through technical SEO. We're going to run through a couple, different items here. First, we're just going to cover the basics that you do for mainly for new website setups, but just to make sure that your current website is set up correctly if you have a website, or things that you need to do when you move website providers, just so you have an idea what you need to be on top of. Next, really important, usability and Core Web Vitals. So this is something that Google's really focused on. It's Core Web Vitals looks at how real actual users experience your website. And this matters a lot. So this part really focus on when I'm sort of discussing it. Accessibility and ADA. Obviously, the Department of Justice is focused on this a bit more right now. And it's also good for SEO, though, as well. But I'm just going to run through a little bit, mention the Domino's case and show you a couple things that you can do for testing your site to make sure it's accessible. As lawyers, your website needs to be accessible because you're offering services to the public. And then the next sort of big one to focus on, especially for lawyers, is the schema markup, especially the stuff that relates to your name, address, and phone number, and frequently asked questions, which gives you a number of opportunities to show up additionally in different places within the Google search results. And then finally, I'll run through some third-party tools and Google tools that you can use just to check out your website to help you make sure things are working fine. So first, let's start with the basics for new websites. Starting with making sure your website's secure. So this is almost everyone has this right now, but you got to make sure you're using HTTPS for your website. So that making sure that there's secure communications going from the user to visiting your website. Again, most folks have it. That was not always the case, 10 years or so ago. But for Google, first, just to see it, if you look at your browser, you'll see it right there. You'll see a lock up at the top, or you'll see HTTPS. So that's how you can tell if your website's secure on that. For Google, though, this has been a ranking signal since 2014. And Google has probably done more than anyone else to really make sure that communications with the websites are actually secure. By making this a ranking signal and tying this to part of the user experience, Google has gotten most websites, especially those that care about ranking well in Google, to make their website secure. So make sure that you have a secure website and as you set things up. And it's not super difficult to do, but you can make sure your provider's doing it. It used to be that certificates cost money, cost $70 a year, $100 a year. But if you want to get a free certificate, you can go to let'sencrypt.org and they offer free secure certificates. So right there's $70 you can save a year by using a secure certificate right at Let's Encrypt. So just wanted to throw that out for you. All right. Normally HTTPS is simple, but it's a necessity. So make sure that's the case. Next thing is doing redirects, making sure that old pages redirected to new pages, your unsecured domains redirected to your secure domain. So again, I break this up into two different parts. First on domains. The big item here is making sure that your unsecured domains are doing a redirect, a 301 permanent redirect is sort of the technical term, but doing redirect to your secure site. Because you might have, HTTP domain.com, your secure site's HTTPS, domain.com. You've got to make sure everything's going to the secure version of it. In general, just for domain choices, I prefer to choose one with a www in front of it because a lot of directories and stuff always tend to either add the www in front or they always tend to link to www. So there's fewer redirect chains if you do that. But not a necessity. You can choose www or just domain.com. But whichever one you choose, you should also make sure the secure version of your domain.com is going to www or the www one's going to domain.com. Because even if you use domain.com, a lot of people are going to add the www in for your link. And if you don't have that redirected, that'll be a problem. So those things, again, you should make sure that anything that comes to these other domains are going to the proper domain, your final domain, which needs to be a secure website. The biggest issue among these are the unsecure ones not being properly redirected, because then you see two versions of the website. Finally, one that's unsecure that could actually hurt you in the rankings a bit. Finally, if you have any marketing domains, like you're using it, Smith and Jones, but you're using a marketing domain, hirebobthelawyer.com or something like that. Make sure that also redirects over to your website. So if you're using marketing domains, unless you have a specialized landing page or something, also make sure that properly goes to your website and is going to the secure version. So anyways, very basic stuff, but the big thing here is double check your unsecure version to make sure that's properly redirecting over, because that tends to be the one that there are issues with. Okay. Domains should be pretty straightforward. Main issue for setting up new websites, but no big deal on that. Most people have that set up fine. Web pages. So you're with a provider, you have a web page, and then you move providers, and the web page is exactly the same, but the URL changes, right? Well, you have the old URL, you have the new URL. You got to make sure the old URL redirects the new URL. All right, no big deal. Now, certainly on your own website, in your own blogs, you should go update the links to make sure they're going to the new one. But also on the server side, you should go through and anything that was coming into the old URL is now redirected to the new one and do a 301 permanent redirect. That way you get all the Google page rank, all the Google link value is passed on to the new URL. You don't lose any of it. And listen, most providers do that. They look at the old site, they look at the new site, they set the redirects. The issues tends to be when you have multiple, if you've switched providers every couple of years or, even every, decade, given how long the internet's been around, and you have old URLs out there that have not been properly redirected. So like your website 3 versions ago isn't properly redirected to the new version. Now that might not be a big deal if there aren't links going to the old website, to internal pages of it. But it might be. You might have some outside links to it, or there might be some, maybe someone blogged about your website or blogged about one of your practice areas and put a link in, and all of a sudden that's a 404 error. So if you have old copies of your website, give that to your provider. If your previous provider has the redirects and they're willing to, they should be willing to provide it to their new provider, they should provide that. So at least they get, one additional version of your website down. But let's say, for whatever reason, you have a rough time finding that. What you can do is go to Google Search Console. And again, we'll do a whole webinar on Google Search Console. And we certainly did a bit on Google Search Console. We were talking about links in the last webinar. But in Google Search Console itself, there is a thing where there's a section where you can look at pages and you can see where there are broken links to your website, where there are 404 not found pages. And you can look through those. And if you see one that looks interesting, like I saw one here for a law site, it looks like, someone had put a link in and it was broken. And then I could go explore, see what website was linking to it. I would want to redirect this page over to the proper page. In this case, they just failed to put the full URL in. But you could also do this to find links that were going to previous versions of your website to make sure they're linking over. In terms of the outside world, in terms of previous versions of your site and broken links, what I really care about, or what you should really care about for SEO purposes, is what Google sees as 404 broken links. So that's what matters. So using Google Search Console to find broken links, these are the ones that Google's saying, these are the ones they're alerting you about. Check these out and fix these. Sometimes you'll have some random spam links with like gibberish. I wouldn't worry too much about those at all. But ones that look real or ones that are important to you, use the Google Search Console, find those broken links and redirect them over to the proper page. Okay. Again, most of that stuff's straightforward. You're setting up a new domain, new website, get your domains all redirected. You've got your old page, it's going to a new one. Everyone should, check their website, Google Search Console, for broken links, just see if there's some easy ways to get some SEO value out of links just by fixing them. The last thing to mention is robots.txt and sitemaps when you're setting up a new site. So robots.txt and sitemaps, what these basically do is they help the Google crawler understand your website. So robots.txt is a file that will be on your server. Sitemaps is a separate, normally an XML file that'll list out your pages. So for example, here's the robots.txt file for the White House, all right? And you can see they have user agent star, which means all user agents. In this particular instance, disallow, they're allowing everything to be indexed. So nothing's being broken, being stopped from being indexed in this case. And then they list out a couple of sitemaps. For most law firms, you might only have one sitemap, but this basically will be it. Very rarely will you have pages that you don't want people to index. Sometimes there are exceptions, but for the most part, you want everything to be indexed on your site. So normally the core thing here is you're actually showing the spiders where the White House, I'm sorry, where the sitemap is, in this case for the White House. So that part's fine. This is most of it. So if you have certain sections that you don't want indexed by Google or other search engines, or maybe some administrative pages or some scripts or something, you can explicitly say, do not index those pages. Here's a more complicated sitemap. This is for the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission. You can see they have lots of different rules, things that they don't want indexed. So, there's a way to run through the rule set here. Again, for most law firms, index everything or just explicitly exclude the stuff that you don't want. You don't have to have something quite this complicated. The one other thing about robots.txt, though, even if you put in, for example, that you don't want a particular page crawled by Google or other search engines, that does not mean that page will not necessarily show up in the Google search engine index. All it's keeping Google from doing is from crawling your page and sort of indexing that content. But your URL could still be visible by Google and show up in the Google search results if there are outside links to it. So there's two things: keeping your page from being indexed by the crawler. The separate thing is keeping it out of the Google index, even if there's some other website linking to it. And to do that, you're going to need to do meta robots with no index tag on the page, or set it up within the header information. Again, I don't expect lawyers to understand this. Your provider should understand it. And normally a lot of the content management systems like WordPress and some of the others have ways to just check a box and they'll take care of that for you. But just in case you ever wonder, I put some stuff in robots.txt and still show up in Google, you actually have to go a separate set to really keep it out of the full Google search results if you have outside links coming to it. All right. Going back to robots.txt, again, White House allowed everything to be indexed, but they list out their sitemap. You can look at a sitemap. In this case, this is the first one here. This is actually a sitemap of sitemaps. So you can have, sitemaps can have sitemaps listed as well. And here's what the first sitemap looks like, and it's a number of pages there. For most, and this is the raw text of the sitemap itself. For most law firms, they're just going to have a sitemap listing their pages. You can list up to 50,000 pages in a sitemap. So, I mean, there's not a lot of law firms, probably any law firms have more than 50,000 pages. But if you have more than 50,000 pages, then you would need to break it up into multiple sitemaps. You might also have different sitemaps for different sections of your site. A lot of times we'll see a sitemap for the pages and a separate sitemap for their internal blog, which is fine. It doesn't matter if the pages are in one sitemap or the other. It doesn't matter if you break it up or not. It's not a big deal on that. But in general, for most law firms, you can put all your pages into one sitemap. And the main value of that robots.txt is it makes sure that Google and the other spiders will find that sitemaps file. So that's the core reason you want to make sure you list it in the robots.txt file. If you don't have a sitemap automatically generated by your content management system, you can actually go to different sites. There's a number of places that'll create free ones for you. Here's one at xml-sitemaps.com. You put your URL in, it'll create a sitemap. You didn't need to upload that to your site, but if you need to manually create a sitemap file to be on your website, there are tools that'll do that for you for free. The final thing about sitemaps is, they'll be found by the robot. If you mention them in the robots.txt, they'll be seen by the spiders. So they'll get picked up and they'll list all the pages out. And that's fine. You can certainly do it that way. If you want to explicitly put it into Google or into Bing, you can do it in Bing as well. You can actually enter it into the Google Search Console. There's a little section here on sitemaps, and then it'll give you an update of how well the page is being indexed, looking through the format of the sitemap and different items like that. So there's ways to sort of do that within Google. Again, for most law firms, I would certainly put it in here, put it with Google, and it'll periodically reindex it. But as long as you have a sitemap, you'll be okay on things. All right. There's other attributes with sitemaps in terms of priority and modified date. But for most law firm websites, it's not a big deal. Normally, highest priority is your home page and pages that update certain pages, but it's not. They're going to index everything once you put it up. The one other item, and I brought this up previously when talking about one of the link webinars, is I actually like to have HTML page. I call it a sitemap page, but basically lists all the pages on my website. For most law firms, they don't have that many pages, and even if it's a couple hundred or even 1,000 pages, I like to have one page on my website where every single page is listed out, so that there is some link value somehow going to those pages, and Google finds some outside links. If you just put the page in a sitemap and you have no outside links coming to it, Google will be able to find it and they will be able to index it, but you still have no links coming to that page, right? So it's not going to rank too high because there's no real link value on it. So getting a sitemap page just to make sure everything at least has one link. Hopefully you have a hierarchy of your pages and you're cross-linking to it, as well within the content and within, sort of, parent-child pages in terms of hierarchy. But if for some reason that breaks down anyway, and there's some page out there that's sort of orphaned, not linked up anywhere, if you put it in a HTML sitemap page, this will actually get picked up, and this is actually quite helpful for you. So I recommend doing this. Okay, that was the basic stuff for setting up websites and getting things going. Just nothing super fancy there. Most law firms have it. Again, the big thing to watch out there is that your non-secure website's not redirecting properly to a secure one. That's the one that I see pop up quite a bit. Okay, now a big item, usability and core web vitals. So this is something that Google's really focused on right now. So this is really important. All right, we're going to start off with core web vitals. Then I'll talk a little bit about accelerated mobile pages and a brief discussion about WordPress and plugins. Okay, here's Justia's homepage. I'm going to run it through a tool that Google has, Google PageSpeed tool. And I'm just going to put our homepage in here, and it's going to give me sort of review of our homepage. The same thing you could do to your pages on your website. You could also do it with your competitors' pages, see how your competitors are doing. You can do it basically to anybody, right? This is a tool that's open for you to check any URL that you want to check. It's going to check one single page. So the first thing, there's mobile and desktop. For the most part, for rankings, mobile is more important than desktop, okay? You want to be doing well on both, but normally if you're doing well on mobile, you almost always do well on desktop, but focus on the mobile results here. This is what matters, the core web vitals, all right? So this says core web vitals passed. This is the real measurement Google's using right now in terms of whether your site's going to rank well or not, is how well it does in the core web vitals. These other items here, performance, accessibility, best practices, SEO, these are diagnostic tools that might give you some opportunities to improve your site so that you can pass core web vitals. But these are just tools and measuring it at a point in time. So it's just like doing a test. Do a quick test of your site, see if there's anything that you can get to fix up. Some things you might want to fix. There might be reasons you don't want to fix other items. Some things you might not be able to fix, right? It's a third-party script like Google Tag Manager. But the core thing to note here is that the core web vitals is what matters. And here's the sort of the desktop version. Same thing, right? Scores tend to be a little higher on desktop. This is the messaging that came out. This is from a little while ago. It was asked whether to John Mueller, who works at Google, does Google page speed still matter anymore? Or is it all Core Web Vitals? And the answer, it's all Core Web Vitals now. Okay. So you got to focus on that. And we'll sort of describe what these different elements are in a second. And one of the reasons it's Core Web Vitals is the test is a test at a point in time. You could do the test later, your scores will change, right? Or it could change. Core Web Vitals is based on real user information. This is actual people using the Chrome browser on phones and on desktop computers and what their actual experience is like. So this is real world experience, and Google cares about the real world experience a lot more than they care about the test. Tests are for helping you, make improvements. The real world experience is the thing that you have to pass. So that's sort of a core item on that. All right. So here's the Core Web Vitals thing. What are these different elements? There's 3 different elements. There's largest contentful paint. We'll look at this on the mobile phone in a second. There's first input delay, and there's cumulative layout shift. So you're going, great. Well, what's that? All right. So let's walk through each of these so you have an idea what they are. So you're coming in, you're on your mobile phone, right? The user's on their phone. The largest contentful paint is just looking at the initial page that you come in on the phone. So here's Stanford's homepage, right? You could scroll through here. There's probably 50 pages of I could keep scrolling. I can see a bunch of different pages here. Google's not concerned about that for largest contentful paint. They're only worried about what shows up when you first load the page. All right, that's it. Now what's lower on the page here? And what they're focused on is what takes up the biggest space on that page. Not the stuff at the top, not the stuff at the bottom. What takes up the biggest chunk of space? A lot of times that's a photo. Sometimes it's a text area. But it's whatever takes up the most. Because what they've seen is that users' experience is based on what they see in that biggest chunk of real estate that's on that screen the first time you load the page. So that's what largest contentful paint is. It's the biggest chunk of stuff. Often on law firm websites, they'll be your header photo. So on your homepage. So having that photo optimized will actually help you do better here, even if the rest of your page is optimized. So you got to think those things through. So that's largest contentful paint, all right? Just on the first screen when you load the page. There is a site called web.dev that Google has that will explain more details to you how to make this a better experience for users and how to optimize it. The short answer is try to get the item that shows up and takes up the most space on that first page to be the first thing that loads on the page, right? Try to get that to load immediately, or at least at the same time as other elements. Don't delay the loading of that element, say after other items have loaded. So try to make that load as fast as possible, because that's how you can be judged, is how fast that loads for users. All right. But web.dev can walk through that for your developer. I mean, not for the lawyers, probably. Unless you want to read it, you can read it, certainly. And it has a bunch of different explanations there. Okay. That's the first one. You come in, what's the biggest chunk? Next one, first input delay. All right. Well, that is when you first click on something on the website. You come into the website, you're on it. Just the first click, not the second click, not the third click, just the first click, whatever you decide to do. Maybe you're clicking a link, maybe you're clicking a navigation item, whatever that first click, how fast is it? How responsive is it? And what happens is sometimes people will have different things running and you click on something and it doesn't show up right away. So in this case, for Justia, if I click, this little navigational hamburger menu, how fast does that respond? Is it really, really fast? Right? Might depend on a couple of things. Sometimes people have so many things in their menus, it doesn't work well. Sometimes they have little JavaScript stuff that's tracking different things. Sometimes they've got, analyzer scripts that are tracking how everybody moves the mouse, and that delays everything. Try to, especially on the first page here, that it shows up above the fold, try not to have that stuff load, and you do not want that stuff interfering with people interacting with your site. If people click on things on your website and it's slow, it's a bad experience. And they've really just focused on the first one. The second, the third, certainly there's value there, but that's not what Google's focused on. It's the first time they touch anything on your website, how responsive is it? It needs to be fast. All right? It needs to be quick. And they measure that by trying to figure out when you actually complete the task within the browser, looking at the sort of the memory usage and the scripting that's going on. You click on something, if the other site that you're clicking to is slow and Google can see that's the outside site, that's not going to harm you. But if it's slow, you click on it and then you're processing stuff before you actually take them to the outside URL, that's on you. That's slow for you. And you got to make that fast. So first input delay, make that very, very short. Your site has to be very, very fast when they click on something. Same thing. Web.dev has the whole page on it. It gives you a whole understanding of it for your developer. So web.dev is a great site, and it'll walk through all these different items and give you some suggestions and ways to sort of solve it. The big thing here is don't get in the way of interactions with people. Last one. And there's only these three that are determining the Core Web Vitals measurement, right? So we've got the biggest paint area. It's got to be very fast when someone clicks on something. The last one is cumulative layout shift. And what this is someone clicks on something and everything moves around. Like law.com, right? I go to law.com, I load up their site, I click on something and suddenly everything moves down, right? Because they're running an ad at the top. It's not immediate. It's not like they load the ad and load the page, and in case everything just sort of loaded. The page loaded, 1, 2, boom, everything shifted down. That's a bad user experience. So you don't want things moving around a lot, especially on this first part right here above the fold in the initial view of the page, right? Maybe things are moving down lower on, but when you get this initial part of the page, this has to be nice and smooth and not moving around. In this case, it was ads. A lot of times you'll see people have fonts. They have custom fonts coming in and they don't match it up with the same size sort of default font. And the fonts come in and suddenly everything shifts around with fonts. Or they're moving, they're running some plugin and suddenly it's bringing in some other element into the page, and suddenly it appears into the page. It jumps in. Or you don't have the width and height around some of your images, and suddenly it suddenly expands out, and your whole page sort of shifts around. So cumulative layout shift is a big deal for users, because when things move around the page unexpectedly, that's a bad experience. So you got to make sure things don't move around, especially on that first page that loads up. All right. So those are the three things. So you yourself as a lawyer can take your phone, you can look at your phone and see how your site, you get a basic idea how it responds when you're looking at it, and then go check it out with the Google Page Speed tool. Just type Google Page Speed tool into Google and you'll get there and put your website in, and just see how it works with your own phone. See what your own experience is. And then if you need to fix things, just fix them. All right. But it's the stuff that's in that initial screen that shows up that matters. Same thing, there's a whole page on web.dev on this, all right? So you can sort of follow through on that. So it's very straightforward. Okay, Core Web Vitals, that's what you need to pass. There's this expanded view here that you can expand out because it's sort of giving averages here. This will actually give you a breakdown a bit on users overall for the page. How many people had a good experience, how many people had a need improvements experience, how many people had poor. Sometimes the poor experience might be they had a odd connection that delayed something loading. It's not always your own website, but you want to try to make almost everything in the good range here. So even the stuff we're passing, it's like 93, 94% had the good experience. So, but there's certainly, it's not 0% had a slightly bad experience or needs improvement or even a poor experience for a few things. So that's just something to note. You can get a little more information there. Okay, let's look quickly here at the test stuff and just sort of walk through these items, because this will give you a couple other things to think about. So it used to be that, the page speed was the big thing that was focused on this page, but now it's Core Web Vitals. And then these test things are really just to give you suggestions on things you need to improve. So performance is the first one. And this will give you ideas on how you can make your page faster, how things can go a little bit quicker, but little things that you might be able to optimize, sometimes images, sometimes scripts. So that's this core part here. And again, I focus on mobile first, and then I do desktop. So if you're looking at the two, mobile is going to count a bit more. And here are some opportunities and diagnostics here. And I can take these, I can expand them out, and it'll give me some suggestions as to things I can improve. Maybe I want to run my style sheets, especially in that top part, right within the HTML page. So I don't have to load a separate file. It says I could optimize the Google Tag Manager JavaScript, right? That could be made a little bit smaller, right? There's some different items here that could be fixed up. So you can use this as diagnostic tools to get some suggestions. It doesn't mean you need to take them all, right? There might be reasons you're doing different things that are outside of the pure speed performance of your site, but it will give you a list of items to check out, okay? Which is fine. One other thing, I mentioned this before. These tests, These are point-in-time tests. You can run these tests over and over again, and you will get different scores and different things will show up. So here we had an 85. I ran it again. I got a 90. All right. Like 10 minutes later, this is the same thing. The base didn't change at all. But you run it through, and then you might run it, check for things, run it again, check for things. We were as high as a 93. We went down as low as a 79 when I checked it. But it sort of jumps up and back. But I chose 85, so I did a number of things I could show you. When I ran a 90, I didn't have quite as many items to sort of show when I highlighted it. But again, you can check it a few times. It's a test. Google's not scoring you based on this test. Google is using this test to give you suggestions. I will say that there are some plugins that are being used on WordPress. There are some website developers, including those for law firms, that when you run this test, they will hide certain elements that are not being tested. I don't think that's helpful. So that's something to note. Two things that will always impact your scores that you shouldn't worry about. One is Google Analytics. The other is Google Tag Manager. All right. So both these things, they're both great things to use. Analytics is a great tool for checking your traffic, right? It's really good. I mean, they're running it for lots of folks. Most law firms don't have crazy number of pages or crazy number of traffic. So the free version is going to work great for you. You're going to get a lot of data from Google Analytics. Google Tag Manager, it's the best way right now to really control all the different scripts coming to your site. Might be, maybe analytics can be in there. Maybe you're doing some Google ads. You can bring that in there. You might have some chat software, Facebook, Bing. You could bring all that in through Google Tag Manager. So you have a nice, easy way to control all these third-party scripts. If you run the test and you're running the test on Google PageSpeed and you hide Google Tag Manager, like some of these SEO folks have been doing to get higher performance scores, you're not going to realize what the issues are that you could improve on some of these other third-party scripts. And like we've worked many times with different folks doing chat scripts to help them improve their chat scripts because they were slowing down the site and explaining to them what they needed to do and how to optimize it, how to get to run for AMP pages, right? We've got a lot of engineers at Justia, so we've helped folks out on that. But you wouldn't even know it if you didn't test it. So you always want to test everything. And you want to make sure you're passing the Core Web Vitals. The worst thing you could do is have a high score on the test and you fail Core Web Vitals. It's not helpful at all, especially if the reason you got the high score is because you just basically hit stuff. So don't do that. Use the testing for what it is there, diagnostics tool. Make sure you pass Core Web Vitals. That's real people, real information. I cannot reiterate that enough. That's what matters. Other scores, not nearly that big a deal. All right, a couple other items here. Best practices. I'll list some things that you should do for your site. It's pretty straightforward. SEO. In this case, we got dinged because we had one link that said read more. Could have been more descriptive. Okay, fine. That's SEO. Might give you some suggestions. Getting 100 on this SEO, it's not SEO. All right. SEO is what we've covered in these 4 webinars. Great content, how to do linking, how to find new opportunities for linking, and getting your basic technical SEO down. Read more. If I said read more news, it would have been fine. But I like the 2-word link is the reason we had it. But you can look through this, but if you get 100 in SEO and you're not ranking high, it's a small, tiny component of technical SEO, not even the full component. Focus on Core Vitals first. This part a little bit less meaningful. Finally, going back to Google Search Console again, we'll cover this in more detail later as a whole. But that's checking one page using this Google PageSpeed tool, right? That takes time, right? So a bit of time to do that. You could go Google Search Console and you could check your entire, all your pages of your site for Core Web Vitals, and it'll give you an overall measurement. So here I'm doing answers.justia.com. Everything was green, which is why I chose this one. Here it is for mobile. Here it is for desktop. But if I had some reds and yellows, I could actually see them. And it would give me some examples. It's not necessarily going to give me every single one that's red or every single one that's yellow, but it give me some examples of things I could fix. And often for a website, something that you fix on one page will impact a bunch of pages because it's often your header, your footer, or some JavaScript you bring in that you're sharing across all your pages. But what's nice about Google Search Console, you can check the whole site at once and get everything fixed up, like we did here for answers. Final, just sort of one last thing. Here's Google's page, right? Clean, simple page. Right here. This is their own Google PageSpeed on this, at least at the point in time that I took the screenshot. So 43. Not that great, right? It's red. But they did pass Core Web Vitals. All right. What matters here? Core Web Vitals. The page speed thing, there's a lot of tracking, different things going on with Google. But that's their own testing their own homepage. If anything was going to get 100, if they really thought that was the key, I'm pretty sure it would be 100. But the Core Web Vitals is what really matters. So just those three elements, right? The initial paint, right? How the largest paint area, right? How fast it is you click on something, how responsive things are, things like that, right? So you got to make sure you're on top of all those different items. Don't have things moving around, shaking in your page loads. Don't be like law.com on that. And finally, go to web.dev. They have lots of information. This is all developers should look at the site. This is put together by Google. Lots of information on how to make your website better for optimization, usability. There's a lot more stuff here than just Core Web Vitals. It's a really good site. Lawyers can read it if they want, a little bit technical, code samples and things like that, but it's really quite good. All right. Core Web Vitals, the biggest thing. I'm going to briefly talk about accelerate mobile pages and speed, and then I'll go on briefly talk about WordPress and then run through the rest of this webinar. All right, so AMP, this accelerate mobile pages. The key thing here is they're lightweight and they're optimized for mobile phones and mobile devices. So this AMP site somewhat works with Google. Here's Google's specific stuff in their AMP on Google part. The key thing with AMP is that basically it's like, the HTML pages, you have AMP pages. They're basically just formats of how, just web pages, how to show stuff to a browser. And AMP, for the most part, is just sort of a smaller, cleaner version of a normal website. So here's a normal website. Most people have responsive websites, right? You make it bigger, you make it smaller. It's all the same content from a desktop to a phone. It's fine. It's just your browser gets bigger, smaller, works on all devices, right? Most folks have responsive sites these days. Here's the mobile version of our responsive site. Here's my AMP page. So slightly different. There's certain limitations I can do on AMP, certain things that I can't do. It almost forces me to make things a bit simpler, to just so it loads faster on the phone. So, which is fine. Is AMP in and of itself necessarily going to make you rank higher or be faster? No, you can make a real simple HTML page and it would be the same as AMP. There's no reason you couldn't have, these things be pretty much the same if I wasn't trying to do extra stuff with the HTML. So they could. It's not, AMP in and of itself is not necessarily going to make it faster, but by doing AMP, you'll be forced to be faster because you can't do some of the crazy stuff that you can do with HTML, right? So that's just something to note. Here's where you can do something on AMP that you cannot do on HTML, and that is be in the Google AMP cache. So here's Google AMP cache right here. This is the big thing. So Google will basically take copies of your AMP pages and put it on all its servers. So you come in here, you've got your website, right? You make your website. This is the responsive website. This is the mobile version. I make AMP pages on my website. I make a full duplicate copy of my website with AMP, right? It's a duplicate copy. There's ways to associate it with, so Google knows the main core content, and the one that's sort of owns the sort of the space and everything is in terms of the text and content is the main HTML version of it. But the AMP, that's again some tagging and stuff. It's a lot more technical we need to go in today. But your developers, if they know how to do AMP, they'll know how to do that. So there it is. There's the AMP version. And then here's the AMP version on Google. All right, so this is a copy of your AMP site sitting on Google. And you can sort of see there's a link back to the back to your website right here. You technically could actually show your URL here, although I don't think it's bad to be associated with Google and the Google URL. But anyways, I wanted to show you this so you can see the Google URL here. This is a copy of the website sitting on Google. You go like, well, that's great. So it's AMP. It's sitting on Google servers, so it's going to load faster, right? Because there's a lot of servers. You got one in San Francisco and Seattle and Denver and Boston and DC and Miami and Dallas. They got servers everywhere, and all these copies of your website are everywhere. So what does that mean? All right, well, I'm going to do a Google search. You're a Boston criminal lawyer. All right, get through the ads, get through the maps. All right, here we are to the organic results. So there's Justia, which is good. Justia is an AMP page. What's going on is when I'm looking at the search results right here on Google, my AMP page is actually loading into my phone. So even while I'm sitting here scrolling around, I have to scroll to get to the organic. All the AMP page, not just my AMP page, any AMP page that's on this organic search results is actually loaded onto my phone, or prefetched, is sitting on my phone. So if I click on it, it's going to be immediate. All right, super fast. Good for everything. Good for Core Web Vitals. Right. So, okay, well that's good. So here it is. And there you sort of see the Google there, right? So it preloaded on. Here's another one, Steve Nyman. Okay, there's Google. Patrick Murphy, Google. Let's go to the next page. It's all kind. Google. Serpa. Google. All right. And then final. So especially for mobile results, right? Desktop results are sometimes slightly different than mobile, but most searches are now done on mobile phones. I'm not saying these guys are all ranking great because they're on AMP. They also have great content. These guys have spent a lot of time on their content. They're competing with each other. But AMP gives them an extra edge on mobile devices and on mobile searches. And just to make clear, that was the top 5 results all showing AMP. That's not a coincidence. Some of these others, Simmons not a bad side, but it's the AMP gives them an extra advantage on mobile. So all things being equal, you'll do slightly better. And the reason you're doing better is because you're sitting in the Google cache and it's loading immediately. Not because it's AMP in and of itself. It's because AMP is the only way to get you these Google cache servers so that your site can load while you're looking at your Google search results and they click on it's immediate. It's good for you. It's good for Google. Like if you click on something on Google phone on your phone on a Google search result and it doesn't load for a while, you're angry with Google. That's whose logo you're looking at while you wait. You don't know why this other site's not loading. You just go, why did Google give me a site that doesn't load real fast? These other ones, immediate. I mean, it's so, AMP is good for speed. AMP is good for user experience. I mean, you should do AMP pages, right? It's a little bit hard, but it's doable. So I would encourage you all to do AMP. It's, not saying every top search result on phones on as AMP page, but it helps everybody. Same thing when they show you an AMP result page, I click on it, it would actually just take me to my HTML version of the page. So it takes me to my HTML core version. You could have a website that's just AMP pages if you wanted to. You can do all types of things. It's just, get more narrowed down. But the Google cache, that's non-trivial. That's extremely valuable to you. So make AMP pages again to the Google cache. Final thing on AMP on Google in particular, analytics. Right now, they're still using universal analytics. We all know that's going to be something. Well, not everybody. It's going to be sunset. They've moved to Google Analytics 4. So there's a new Google Analytics that you have to move to, and you have to get ready for that. And they don't have, for Google Analytics 4, they have not yet made that. Google itself has not added new tags for AMP pages. But there's a guy named David Vallejo. He's gone ahead and done it. This works fine. You can modify a little bit, or your developer can modify a little bit if you want to. There's also a plugin that he's worked on for WordPress. All right. I know a lot of people use WordPress. So you can get Google Analytics 4 working with AMP. So that shouldn't be a reason that you don't use it. All right. And Google will eventually get to it. Final thing with WordPress plugins and usability. A lot of people use WordPress. We build things on WordPress. A lot of plugins. WordPress is a content management system, right? It's a way to enter content in. What you do in terms of producing your website, the export will depend on a number of different things, right? It's just because you use WordPress in of itself doesn't make it great. Right? I know Google does some stuff with WordPress. They're really trying to help it because there's so many websites with WordPress that they're trying to help them optimize things. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's you can make static pages. You could have super fast caching of your database, and there's a lot of plugins. So you need to know what you're doing with WordPress to actually get it to really be fully optimized and get the best user experience for it. The one thing that does jump out a lot of times is people using random plugins to do things that aren't really helpful, especially plugins that are pulling data from the database itself while rendering the page. And that leads to pages loading slower. That leads to sometimes things jumping around. You have a little here are the last 10 visitors to my website. I'm showing the IP addresses of them, and that element, delays before it loads up. It's only everything moves slightly, the content shift that you don't want to have. Different word clouds that you're trying to pull in recent search terms and stuff. There's ways to optimize some of this stuff, but a lot of times you got to be careful what plugins you use. Just because it's WordPress doesn't mean you can put every plugin and you're still going to be fine. So you really need to focus on how you optimize it. You've got to pass that core web vitals. You need to make sure and core web vitals, part of that is making sure your website's fast and clean. And some of these plugins get in the way of it. There's also other issues with plugins, security, and different items like that you need to be aware of. Hopefully your developers on top of that. But the main thing is, just because it's a plugin WordPress doesn't mean you can just start using it. You really need to think it through and really try to do what's best for you to optimize the user experience using WordPress. WordPress, Great way to put up content. Easy to use. A lot of people use it. It's nice to get exports of your core content. You can move it around, do templates. But you got to be careful exactly what you do with WordPress because it's not optimized out of the box. All right, I'm going to run through just a few more items here. Accessibility and ADA. Again, this is something that can help you with SEO, but it also can help you with the law, right? So a lot of folks know the Domino's case that came out a while ago, a few years ago, and basically said ADA requirements in the Ninth Circuit, at least, are going to be imposed even if there's no set requirements by the government. So the government had delayed when they were going to put out sort of a safe harbor as to what you had to do for a website. Domino's had some issues, missing alt text, things like that, which would be good for SEO regardless. But the basic thing is they were found liable for it. And again, there's a split among the circuits of it, but it's a court case, right? It's a legal issue, not just a SEO issue. Although most of the stuff they ask you to do for accessibility is great for SEO. So we've always been focused on it because it's just a good idea. All right. Now, at the current time, the Department of Justice, and this is, by the way, is the beta version of their site, which is pretty good. They are now requiring that your site be ADA compliant. So here's sort of the highlighted part here. That if you're offering goods and services to the public, you're not just as your storefront and everything else need to be accessible, but the website itself is seen as a public accommodation that needs to be accessible. So your website needs to be accessible to the individuals, the public, if they have disabilities in particular. Visual disabilities, could be audio stuff if there's audio issues on your site. So you got to be on top of that part. All right. You got to make your site accessible. Good. It's still a great idea for SEO, but let's sort of run through a couple tools here. So first, we saw the Google tool earlier. I skipped by that a little bit, but here's Google Page Insights. Here's accessibility. You can click there. It will give you basically a basic accessibility score, which is good to have, and they'll also list some items that you need to manually check. All right. So these items I need to take a look at. So which are fine. I have other tools I'll show you in a second to check those out. But at a basic level, you can use the same Google PageSpeed tools. Just get a quick glance if Google sees your site is accessible. Not the end all, but something to start with. Some past audits gives you an idea of some of the things that they check for. Okay. All right. Here's the current ADA site. Now we just saw the beta site, but this is a current ADA site. I ran this through. Well, first they failed Core Web Vitals, but they also failed accessibility. Well, they didn't pass. They got it yellow. If you're the ADA.gov site, if you talk about a site that should get 100 on accessibility from Google, it's the ADA.gov site. Well, they got an 84 because they're missing a label on one of their form elements. All right. That would take them about somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds to fix, but instead they're being made an example of in this presentation. So again, the new site passes the accessibility, at least the homepage of it. Although both the old site and the new site fail Core Web Vitals, which apparently not part of the ADA compliance scheme for folks, but should be for your SEO, as I mentioned. Here's the failure. All right. For your own website, what tools should you use? There's a tool called Wave. So if you go to wave.webaim.org, it's a Wave tool that's a plugin. You can also check out some different pages. This is the best tool I think to use. This is the one that we've used. I know folks over at some of the different universities and colleges have been using this tool to make sure they're self-compliant as well. And you can run this tool. I use as a plugin on Chrome, and it gives you a quick little readout of how well your site's doing. So here it is. It's sort of highlighting the different elements. So I can see here's a summary of it. Here are the alerts, right? I can check out my alerts. I had no errors and no contrast errors, but I did have some alerts, things I need to check, using, multiple links going to the same page, different things like that. Most of these are totally fine. And I think all of them are totally fine in this particular instance. But you can check those out manually, and then you have different features and things. Reference is just how you would click on something. This is just sort of the organizational structure of the site. And here's the contrast page of it. But the big two that I like to look at are the summary and the details. And then I look at the contrast part, because the contrast something is sometimes people miss that. And that's also important. So those are items. But this is a tool that you could actually use to go check out your pages. So this is something, use this tool. This is really, really good. There's a lot of other tools out there. What I can say about this tool is that this is what we use. It's our core tool. And colleges and universities have been using it. And we know they're the ones that are getting studied the most for ADA stuff. So they're always on top of that stuff. All right. That's successful in ADA. Those suggestions will help you with SEO. It's also the law. Department of Justice is requiring this now. Okay. So it's a requirement on it. Next sort of big item here. This is just at least the 2 items. This will be pretty quick, but there are 2 items here that I want to focus on. This is schema markup. Now I covered HTML markup previously when talking about the content areas, title tags and H1 tags and things like that. This is schema markup. This is slightly different. So schema markup is basically markup that you could do on the page. It's not really visible, but it helps Google or other search engines or other browsers understand what's on the page. So all this is some markup to help explain what's on the page, even if you can't visually see what the markup is, right? So here's schema.org, and then here's Google Search Central, which actually talks about the elements of schema that Google search is focused on, right? So you really want to be, schema.org has all types of stuff. And Google works a lot with the people at schema.org, but the one you want to focus on is Google Search Central. Okay, this is the one that matters. All right, we're going to walk through 3 of these. The first 2, really important, okay, that really matter. Name, address, phone number, right? Basically making sure that's marked up on your pages. And then frequently asked questions on it. And breadcrumbs, you should do breadcrumbs, but not quite as important as the first 2. There's more than that, but these are the 3 that I would focus on for a law firm website. There's a lot more that you can do here than just these 3. First, for the name, address, phone number, there's legal service. Legal service is a subtype of local business. So local business legal service is part of local business. That's the one you want to choose. There used to be one called attorney, which was a subset of legal service. That one's been deprecated. Don't use attorney anymore. Use legal service. All right. You can go on to the schema.org. They're not attorney. You don't want to be using attorney. Legal service is the one you want to use, if you're in legal services, but it's part of local business. So when you look at the Google Search Central site, local business is the one that you want to be, what legal service is tying into with a little bit more specific information. Another thing to note, there's some information that's required for schema, some that's not. So you want to make sure you get the core requirement stuff in that you need to get, but other things like you don't have to necessarily put your pricing in, right? So those things like that are not necessarily required. So let's take a look at an example site. There's Jacob Sapochnik. He's in San Diego, immigration lawyer. And there's his address on his footer. And there's sort of the coding of the schema markup of it, which again, ideally your content management system will do it. I don't expect you to put this in by hand. There's also ways to use it. There's this thing called JSON LD that you can do. You can use it that way as well. Just sort of puts an additional snippet into your page as well. So Google can read the JSON LD directly without reading the microcodes. Both are okay. But yeah, again, as a lawyer, you shouldn't be doing this, but it should just be built into your system. And the key thing is here is there's different information you can put in. Like he doesn't have his pricing in because he's doing immigration. Some of it might be flat fees, right? Might be maybe K-1 visas, a flat fee. Something like deportation defense, that might be hourly, right? The prices might be different depending on different services as well. Maybe getting green cards at a different price, right? These different fixed fee prices. So, sometimes you'll see there are elements that you might want to add, but you might not want to add. If you run some tools, sometimes they'll say that these optional elements are errors, but they aren't. Go back and check the actual schema.org site as to what's required and what's not required. But the main thing here is you want to get your name, your address, and your phone number in. All right, those are the main things you want to get. There's a couple other required elements like logo and things, but those are the main thing. You want the name, address, phone number to get those in there. And it needs to match up with your Google Business profile because part of this is to help you with your Google Business profile. So here's, San Diego immigration lawyer. Here's the maps. There's Jacob. Especially important on your own website, if your website's the website that's tied to your Google Business profile, they have this additional markup just to reinforce that this address location is the same as this address. So your address location on your website is the same as the one on your Google Business profile. So especially on the website, again, you have your Google Business profile, that website in particular, you should try to get the schema markup put into. All right. There are plugins that do this on WordPress and Joomla and some of the other content management systems. But regardless of that, you should figure out how to do it and get that tied in. It will help you a bit with Google Business profile rankings, which is really, important, right? It's a lot of different things going to Google Business profile, but name, address, phone number consistency is one of the key things. All right. That's the big one. If you do just one, do name, address, phone number, because I know the maps here and Google Business profile rankings are really important. Second one is FAQs. So FAQs, again, we'll walk through it. There's a schema page on it. There's a page for Google Search Central. All right. There's a whole thing on it. Let's just take a look at it a little bit. And again, you can build this in with some plugins. There's different ways people build this into their websites, their blogs, so you can sort of add these things as elements there. But let's just take a look at what having proper FAQ setup gets you. So here's Ron Miller's Miller and Zoyce's site. And we'll just go take a look at this one. How do you prove medical malpractice in Maryland? Here's the question and answer. He had a few others here as well. And this is the schema markup around it. Now, the overall page will have an FAQ page type around it, but this is for an individual question and answer with this sort of schema markup. All right. There's a question, there's an answer, some other styling around it, which is fine. It's also a link right there to proven. The word proven is actually a link. All right. Let's see what that means. He marked up that page. How does that help him by marking up that FAQ page? There's a few different places you can show up because he did that markup. First, this is the organic results, right, for Maryland medical malpractice lawyer. All right. And there's Miller and Zoyce here. All right. You see, he's got two little questions and answers right here with little arrows that drop down. Okay. Something to take a look at. If I expand one, it gives me more vertical height. So now I have more vertical height because I had a question and answer there. I get a little bit just because the question's right there, but now with the question and the answer, it expands it out a bit. All right. Okay. That's fine. That's a desktop version. Let's look at what that would look like on the mobile. So putting this thing here at the top for the mobile. If I expanded these things on the mobile, I take up a full screen. All right. So suddenly on the mobile device, it's even more important to have this. It just gives you, it's one more thing for people to click on, and it gives you more vertical height, and it will help you increase your click-through rates, which will also help you in your rankings. So there's a win-win-win, and of course, you're helping users by finding an answer. So there's the whole page there. Now that said, I want to bring up one thing here. If I click on this top link here, it takes me over to this page. All right, that's fine. This is my normal Maryland medical malpractice page. But I also put a link here in the answer. And I would encourage everyone, for every answer you have, try to put one link into that first sentence or two of the answer. Normally in the first sentence, if possible. Because one, you're going to get another link here, which in this case goes to a slightly different page. It could go onto the same page. But the other thing is, people are more likely, if they're going to expand that, the probability that someone's going to click on a link while they're reading that answer is greatly increased. In fact, they're more likely to click on that link than they click on the top link. So you should really try to add that in there. It's an extra way of that Google's allowing you to get an extra link over to your website, to get people over to the website where you have all your marketing stuff on by putting that link into that answer. So a lot of times I see questions and answers, they don't have that link in the first sentence. Well, great. But then they might just read the answer and not go to your site. Just put that link in there and increases the probability to visit your site, which is really what you want them doing. All right. So that's something to note. So that's one part. The organic results is one. Another thing is featured snippets, which I know everybody cares about. Here's a featured snippet right here at the top. Miller and Zoyce, right? There it is. Featured snippets are often questions and answers. So having questions and answers for featured snippets is a pretty big win. So it's another bite that you get. You don't have to have a question and answer for a featured snippet, but Google seems to favor them. And having the markup helps Google determine the question and answer, and it's going to help you with featured snippets. There it is. I click on it. This actually takes me to the part of the page when I clicked on it the answer came from. All right. So it's something in that's additional sort of bite at the apple you're getting from an FAQ markup. And the final one, of course, is the people also ask section, right? Here it is. I expand this one out. Again, another one for Miller and Zoyce. It's the same markup. They did all these different questions and answers. I'm just showing you 3 different places they came. And there you go. There it is. See that? It takes you to the page. All right. Here's the thing. You could do FAQs. You might get without doing any of the schema markup, you might still show up as a featured snippet. You might still show up in the people also ask, right? I see non-schema marked up stuff showing up as featured snippets and people also ask. I think you increase your probability you'll be in one of those two, especially if your question and answer is lower on the page, not the top of the page. But it's not a necessity. But for getting into the organic results, getting more vertical height, that's where I think you have to have the FAQ markup on it. I do not see anyone showing up with those extra questions and answers without using the schema markup on the organic results. But that said, it's a good idea to do for everything. It will help with everything. So I would go ahead and do it for all things. All right. Final thing here is breadcrumbs. again, the search schema.org and the Google Search Console. Breadcrumbs are this, right? It's just helping Google understand what the hierarchy of your site is. That's all it is. There's other ways to do it. Here's the markup. No big deal. Your breadcrumbs can also sometimes show up here in the organic results. But it's really, you're just trying to help Google understand the hierarchy. If you don't do it, they'll probably still figure it out, but make it easy. And I showed previously on the link webinar that your hierarchy can actually help your parent pages. So the children pages actually help the parent pages, but it helps for you to explain to Google what's a child page and what's a parent page. So yeah, I would add breadcrumbs in. But of the three, the least important. The one for the Google business profiles most, then FAQs, then the breadcrumbs. All right, with that, let me quickly run through some tools and then we'll wrap it up here and do some Q&A. Third-party tools. First, I already mentioned this to you. The Wave, you should get this and use Chrome, add the plugin, check out your pages. Nobody wants to get sued. Eventually there's gonna be lawsuits everywhere. Fix the things up. Normally you've got, law firm website. There's normally core elements. You fix one page, it fixes them all. Go ahead and do this. It helps you for SEO. Alt text is not a bad idea. Okay. Having alt text for images is accessibility. It's also good for SEO, right? One of the things that hit dominoes, no alt text on some of their images. Come on, just do it. All right. Screaming Frog. This is software that lots of developers like us like to use to go check out sites. Lots of different, it'll run through your whole site. It'll give you suggestions, to, make notes of how things are cross-linked, all types of things on it. It's great software. Basically, you do up to 500 URLs for free. And for most law firms, that's what you can do. So I would go ahead and download this. It's quite useful. A lot of people use it, right? We use it. I think, Mockingbird, Attorney Sync, those guys use it. It's quite good software. SEMrush, I brought this up last time, is the one that I like the best for link checking, right? They also have tools that'll check out your site. So if you're going to pick one of these, SEMrush, Ahrefs, Majestic, these different ones, Moz, for checking backlinks and checking your competitors' backlinks, different things. If I picked one, I pick SEMrush. They also have tools to help you check out your website itself. Google PageSpeed, right? The PageSpeed tool that I showed earlier. Again, it's free. Go do it. Go check it out. Make sure you're passing your core web vitals, and then you can go look for different diagnostics and different ideas that you might want to do to improve your site. Again, some of it you might want to do, some of it you might not want to do, some you might not be able to do, right? I would not give up on Google Analytics, though, a Google Tag Manager, just because I want my score to go higher, right? Make it the reality. Don't hide that from the test, right? Just if you don't see Google Analytics showing up as an issue and you have Google Analytics, then you know they're hiding it. That's one way to check it. Google Search Console will do a whole webinar on this. Obviously, lots of different features here, from backlinks to checking out your core web vitals to your site. Lots of stuff going on here. Rich results test. This is where you can check your schema from Google, right? So Google uses this sort of to check things out. So that would be something to work on. A couple plugins you can use here. Google has SiteKit, which works for WordPress, right? All it does is allow you to tie all your Google accounts in easily, right? Your Google Search Console, your analytics, allows you to put some things in, easy to use, right? Just make it simple. And Yoast, right? What the White House used, right? When we saw the sitemap, they used Yoast to produce their sitemap. It's really good for WordPress. It's a great SEO plugin. Our clients use Yoast, all right? So you should go check Yoast out. So those are some tools you should use. The big thing you should take from this, let me sort of stop my share here for a second. The big thing you should take from this overall is you need to focus in on core web vitals. That's the big thing. Those three elements in core web vitals in particular. I showed them all to you, remember? And the schema markup, especially for your name, address, phone number, and for FAQs. So the other stuff, hopefully, you're all taken care of. Hopefully your site's passed all accessibility issues. You got all your redirects done. All that should be basic stuff. But those two you focus in on and really try to make sure you're hitting those, because those can have a big impact on how well you rank and where you show up on it. And then I would do AMP pages if I can do AMP, right? Not a necessity, but if you could do it, get your developer to do it. I do think it gives you an extra nudge, at least what I've seen with our clients, just by having AMP pages for mobile searches. Okay, so I would do that for mobile search. So I will leave it there and I hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We will now move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. If you have any questions for Tim that you'd like to ask, feel free to add them in the Q&A button. It should be at the control panel at the bottom of your screen. It looks like we already have a couple questions here, so we can go ahead and jump right in. Our first question for Tim is going to be, is it better to use WordPress for my site to rank on Google?
Well, so WordPress is just a content management system, right? So you're just a way for you to put up content. Whether it's good for Google or not is really going to depend on what the output of that site is. So you need to optimize it doesn't matter how great it is for adding content. What really matters to Google are where the pages. So if you have static pages or you have really fast loading pages, pages that pass your core web vitals, that's good. If you don't, it's not good. And your developer needs to work on that and make sure it matches those things to make sure, you're not doing crazy stuff and make sure that you have things optimized out. So it's optimizing both certain WordPress templates, it's optimizing plugins. All those things need to be sort of taken into account. But WordPress in and of itself, no, it's not make or break WordPress. We've had our own development system, moving over to WordPress just because it's easier for people to update stuff with. But our stuff was, bearing WordPress stuff on the JWeb because it was static, and it's the same thing with our new WordPress. It's very, very fast on it. But it doesn't mean you can have a horrible site with WordPress. So you got to take into account. Go check your site out, see how you're actually ranking. But itself, no. But there are sites that do well with WordPress, so it is doable with WordPress. So again, an easy use, and that's what we're using now. So I would take it with a grain of salt, but make sure you're doing it the right way.
Thank you. Our next and last question that we have time for today is, how often should I be checking my site for technical errors?
Well, probably a couple things. First, for the sort of the core web vitals on the Google PageSpeed test, and that data is getting updated about once a month, once every 4 weeks or so. So that like you did the test, it updates every 10 minutes. The other one updates every month in terms of looking at. I would probably check my site out maybe once a month just to see how things are going. If I'm making adjustments though, I might test it out right away. So if I went in, I made some tests, I made some adjustments on my site, I might go run that page speed test immediately. Because I just made my adjustments 2 seconds ago so you get the current version of the site. But ongoing, if you're not making changes to your site, then I'd probably say at least once a month. So I'd look on that part. And then I'd focus my other time on writing better content. So content's still the key. I don't want to discount that out. Technical SEO is a necessity, but you've got to have great content. All those guys that were ranking, AMP helped. Content is what drove it. So content and links after content.
Thank you. And thank you all for your questions. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.